Hi, my name is Professor William Corder, and today we're going to talk about Latin America as a region. As I mentioned before, sometimes the textbook and I may very well have slightly different views on what something is, but that's okay, and I'm going to point one of those things out today. A region in geography, from a geographical context, is a place with certain characteristics in common, and that may very well include landforms, climate, and vegetation, and or language, religion, and history. But notice the first three of those things are physical characteristics, whereas the second three are human characteristics. And in a world regional geography class, we look at both of these types of characteristics. Now, I would define Latin America as every place in the Western Hemisphere south of the US-Mexico border and having been colonized primarily by Spain and Portugal. If you just take those three characteristics combined, every place in the Western Hemisphere south of the US-Mexico border, and having been colonized primarily by Spain and Portugal, there really isn't any place in the world that would fit that type of characterization other than Latin America. Now, Latin America as a term is problematic to some people. I've been all over the place in Latin America, and I really don't see a problem with it because most people in Latin America refer to Latin America as Latin America. But I understand it because it does come from European colonization. If you look at Latin America on a map, like the map that we see right here, you can see that Latin America has the greatest latitudinal extent of any place on Earth, which means from north to south. And it starts up at the US-Mexico border and goes all the way down to Tierra del Fuego in the southern part of South America. Because of this, it stretches across multiple of the large climatic zones on Earth. And in addition to that, because the Andes Mountains runs through South America, and the Andes are the second highest mountain range on Earth with peaks over 20,000 feet high, and because a big piece of Latin America is in the tropical zone, which is found between 23.5 degrees north and 23.5 degrees south, and is characterized by being hot year-round and oftentimes sort of steamy and hot year-round. When you have that steamy hot along the lower elevations and then you go up higher into the mountains, it gets colder and colder and colder until eventually you reach glaciers. And because of these things, Latin America has kind of an incredible amount of climatic diversity. Now, we're going to divide Latin America up into 4 subregions. The textbook talks about 2 things, what it calls Middle America and South America. So I'm going to split it up into 4 subregions, which is fine. A subregion is an area within a region itself, so it has the characteristics of a region, but at the same time it has many unique characteristics within the overarching umbrella of the region. The way we're going to go through it is like this. First, we're going to start with Mexico. Now, Mexico is the second biggest country, the second largest country in population, the second biggest economy, and has the second greatest global connections in Latin America. At the same time, because Brazil is number 1, if I talked about Brazil first, the problem with that is that most people in the United States don't know a lot about Brazil, and I can prove this to you right now. If I said to you Mexican food, there you go. If I say to you Brazilian food, okay, most people don't know what that is. So we have someplace to start that's a nice foundation that we can build on if we start with Mexico. After that, we're going to go to Central America, which is the 7 countries that act as a kind of land bridge between Mexico and South America, and they are Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. These 2 things combined, Mexico and Central America, make up what we call Mesoamerica. Now, the term meso means middle, so it implies Middle America. But when you use the term Mesoamerica, you're really talking about other things than just simply a physical location on planet Earth. This would be someplace where the textbook and I see things perhaps a little bit differently, because the textbook talks about Middle America being every place between the United States and South America, but that includes the West Indies. I would not look at it like that. Mesoamerica, when you use that kind of a term, it implies that you're talking about the great indigenous civilizations that existed prior to the arrival of the Spanish. So let's look at these 2 maps here. The one on the left of Mexico, notice that there's a 2,000-mile-long border with the United States. The second of our discussion boards is going to be about that 2,000-mile-long border. And then there's Central America with Guatemala and Belize and Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama acting as this land bridge between Mexico and South America. Now, as I said about Mesoamerica, one of the things about it that makes it kind of unique is that it was the center of these great indigenous cultures. Tikal, that you see on the left-hand side, was the center of the Mayan Empire for several hundred years. And then on the right-hand side, you can see one of these very famous Olmec heads The Olmec civilization existed probably 3,000 years ago along the Atlantic coast of Mexico, and maybe was the foundational civilization for all of the great indigenous cultures that existed in Mesoamerica. Then after that, we're going to go to the West Indies. The West Indies are the islands of the Caribbean, if you will, or Caribbean. And whether you're a pirate or not, I don't know. But there's two sets of island groups in this greater island group called the West Indies. There's the Greater Antilles, which are the four largest islands: Cuba, Jamaica, Hispaniola, and Puerto Rico. Then there's the Lesser Antilles, which are all of the small islands. And if we look at this map, you can see here's the islands of the Caribbean. And the Greater Antilles are Cuba, the largest island in the Caribbean, Jamaica, which is just south of Cuba, the land of Bob Marley and reggae music and ganja, Hispaniola, which is home to two countries, Haiti and Dominican Republic, but the physical feature is called Hispaniola. The two countries are Haiti and Dominican Republic. You know, if you're American, you probably know that Dominican Republic produces a lot of baseball players. And then a part that is tied to and connected to and a part of the United States, Puerto Rico. The Lesser Antilles are all of the rest of the little islands, from the Virgin Islands up in the north down to Trinidad and Tobago. So it's that arc of small islands that's off to the eastern side of the Greater Antilles. After that, we're going to talk about South America. And South America has 13 countries in it. Those 13 countries are Brazil, French Guiana, Suriname, Guyana, Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Paraguay, Chile, Argentina, and Uruguay. Do you know which one of these countries speaks Portuguese? Brazil. Very good. How about Dutch? That's a little harder. Suriname. Excellent. English? That would be Guyana. And then French, that should be obvious, French Guiana. Okay, if you look at South America is a large amount of real estate. I just pointed out to you that there's multiple languages there, and I didn't even touch on the many, many indigenous languages. Okay, this is the beginning of our study of Latin America.